Greetings, Knights. Pastore-Theriaque of War Nation here to bring you an extremely special treat where I will be personally interrogating MIDOKI developer Lynsey on your behalf. This is going to be a long ride, so buckle in, but before we take off, I want to touch base on the direction of this video. Across all social media platforms, you all asked a whopping total of 207 questions. If I tried to make a video of every single one of those being answered, it would likely surpass the extended edition of Lord of the Rings in length. So this is what I'm going to do. Many of your questions touch on the same root themes, so to give Lynsey the freedom to spoil as much as she is allowed to about a topic, I have reduced the questions to their fundamentals. If your question was used to help, you'll be credited in that section. This way you guys can feel seen and also be as informed as possible. Now, let's go find Lynsey, and in order to do that, I'm gonna need to be canonized. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, Lynn, here we go. Let's start things off with some more technical questions. Question 1. Atlantica. It's on everyone's mind. When is it coming, and what can you tell us about it?
Apologies if I sound like I'm trapped down a well, I don't have the best mic setup. So yes, Atlantica. First disclaimer, everything that I'm going to tell you is accurate at the time of us recording this. Obviously, everything is a work in progress, so it might look or act quite differently from how it is described or depicted in this video. So with the disclaimer out the way, on to what I can tell you. Or rather, what I can't tell you. So I can't give you an exact date for when Atlantica will be coming out. I know, boo! It won't be in the next update because that's going to be Dark Portal, but hopefully it will be soon without committing to anything firmer than that. To get to the portal that takes you to Atlantica, you will need to be level 60, you will need to have defeated Ultra Carnage, which I know a few of you have done so already, and you will need to have explored Karnheim thoroughly, because unlike the previous regions, the exit isn't on the final boss battle. Once you pass through the portal, you'll find yourself in Aachen, which Knighthood lore nerds will know is quite a major place in Knighthood's history. It's where heroes such as Lance and Millicent fought against the Dark Ones. And this is a bit more visually consistent with our previous environments because it is on the mainland continent. But once you move south onto the islands of Atlantica, the visuals change quite drastically. Atlantica is very inspired by ancient Greece, as you can probably guess by the name. It's inspired by the legend of Atlantis. So yes, it's very sunny, lots of beaches, white columns, very aspirational, ideal holiday destination apart from the horrible monsters that live there. So we have our sea trolls. You might notice that they resemble Dagon, one of the guild bosses. With Atlantica, there are a few things that throw back to existing lore and characters within the Knighthood universe. We have beast enemies. So these are inspired again by ancient Greek mythology, as you can see. Minotaurs, lovely stuff. This one looks quite sad. He looks like a small child that's been told that he can't go to a party. And here we have one of our Atlantis outlaws who are more humanoid, and you can see they kind of dress in sort of traditional ancient Greek inspired armour. We're hoping that Atlantica will provide a bit of a smoother, less frustrating experience than Karnheim did. Karnheim, we fully acknowledge, was a bit choppy on release, in that we had a lot of economy features that we thought, yeah, it's okay, we can add those later, like the monster cave and the shrines. But when we released it, it was kind of really apparent that not having those was a detriment to the region as a whole. So we wanted to make sure with Atlantica that everything that was in there will be in there. So we are also making sure that we're updating the bounty board, updating the Enlightenment library. We're also going to be toning down the difficulty of Karnheim, so the curve won't carry on being quite as steep as Karnheim was. Because one of the issues we also found with Karnheim that the battles went on for a little too long because the enemies were so hard, they were tanky, really difficult to get down. So we were hoping this is a slightly punchier, more entertaining experience, but we will be putting in safeguards to make sure that people can't just blast straight through or get to the point where their knight level is massively running away from their gear and hero levels. As for the level cap in Atlantica, it depends which bit of Atlantica you're in. So the level cap actually varies as you're going through Atlantica, but it ends up at level 70. So yes, Atlantica, coming soon, probably.
Question 2. Longtime veterans of the game are drooling over the prospect of one thing: extra loadouts. Can we count on seeing more?
Yes, we will be bringing out more loadouts in the future. From a technical point of view, it's actually relatively easy to do because we did future-proof it when we implemented loadouts. The question just is how we introduce them and whether we want to tie it in with another feature such as the second set of mythic gear.
Question 3. What in the world will we ever be able to do with all of these charms we aren't using?
Yes, we do have a plan. So we want to introduce mythic charms which will require the player to use a lot of their existing charms to create. At least that's the current plan. It might change because it's in the very early stages of concepting. So we didn't want to put charms up available for distillation in the Temple of Aeons if there was even a remote chance that we were going to be asking players in the future to collect large amounts of charms for sacrificing. There's a few aspects of charms which we might just completely re-review in the future, so we haven't got the situation where there are a bunch of charms that are universally regarded as being a bit duff. Sideswipe charms, I'm looking at you. And also we are aware of the minion crit charm issue, and it is on the list to get fixed.
Question 4. Everyone knows being fashionable is the real meta. What kinds of changes are in store for our knights and heroes regarding the long untouched customization chests and shops?
With our increase in art bandwidth, I am hoping that we'll be able to get some more non-event skins in various places. However, with Atlantica currently being in the works, it's not a priority at the moment because obviously a new region requires a lot of art assets, but I'm hoping it is something we can do in future. We do actually have a lot of stuff as well that's kind of technically in the game but players can't see. So you may have noticed from some of our marketing artwork, occasionally there's the odd bit or odd customization that people say, oh, where'd you get that from? I've never seen it, and it's because it's literally not accessible in game because it was done in soft launch and never went into any of our core armor paths, so light, magical, heavy, etc. So I'm hoping at one point we can maybe convert some of those into skins, and maybe do a few colour variations of people's favourite gear as well, because I heard that some people like green.
Question 5. Speaking of skins, Redux chests. They are brutal. Any plans for players to have easier access to some of those luscious older assets?
We haven't got any plans to change the Redux chests in the near future. We do have some vague ideas maybe in the more distant future, but nothing imminent. However, if you do want to have easier access to some of the earlier event gear, you might be interested in checking out the Dark Portal store, which I'm not going to talk about now because I know that there's another question about it later.
Question 6. Being able to customize your knight's attire is all fine and good, but how about their bodies? Any plans on ever being able to customize height and weight?
The short answer to that is no, but as it's a question we get asked every now and again, I think it's worthwhile going into a bit more detail as to why that is. So just to give a bit of background on how things work at the moment, we currently already have two body types. We have male and female. So that means for every single piece of armour in the game, there are two models, the male version and the female version. Obviously, if you're adding an extra body type for the male and female knights, that doubles that up to 4 models for one piece of armour. and if you add an extra body type on top of it, that's 6 models for 1 piece of armour. So I think we worked out that even adding 1 new body type would involve remodelling over 1,500 items in game, which unfortunately isn't really feasible. And that's not even getting into having to redo all the rigging, new animations, new cameras for each new body type. So it's not something that we're planning on doing in the near future, or possibly ever. Because also we're really attached to our knight's noodly arms.
Question 7. The ability to hide your cape entirely is an extremely popular visual option in many RPGs. Will our knights ever be able to do this?
I've checked on this, and apparently there's no technical reason we can't do it, and there's no art reason we can't do it, so it might actually be something that we implement in the future. The only question is how we go about it, whether we rejig the UI on the knight screen and have a toggle the same way that we do for the helmets, or whether we approach it similar to the customizations where there's effectively a blank slot that we add for everyone if they don't want to be wearing a cape. So yes, there's evidently a lot of Ednas out there.
Question 8. Gauntlets, the fundamental weapon in a Ranged Knight's arsenal, deserving of a hefty multi-part question slot. Any gauntlet rebalances or changes on the horizon, any new gauntlets to fill in the current gaps in terms of class and weapon combos, will we ever see some new gauntlet skins hit the shops? Will the visual indicator of how close you are to unlocking them ever be improved, and the cost of unlocking them ever scale with your progress?
There's no plans to make any changes or rebalancing to the existing gauntlets in the near future. It's not to say it will never happen, but it's not something that's on our radar at the moment. New gauntlets, however, are a far more likely prospect and something that we will potentially be looking into in the future. Again, I can't see it happening in the next couple of months, could be wrong, but yeah, it is something that we would consider. As for skins, it's certainly something we would consider adding more gauntlet skins into various places. We do actually have a lot of skins concepted up for previous deal armour, so for example the Raven armour, there's quite a cool gauntlet concept for that. But yeah, it's not something again that's going to be happening in the near future. And yes, the question about the visual indicator and the scaling of gems to unlock is a really interesting and quite convoluted one. So as for the visual indicator with the numbers of how close you are to actually unlocking the gauntlet, it's something that we did have in very early soft launch, but a lot of our playtesting and our publisher at the time said it was massively off-putting to more casual players who felt it made the game seem more hardcore. So that got taken off. I personally feel that there is definitely an argument to at least have a toggle to have those numbers on there, not just on the gauntlet unlocking, but even like on health bars and things. So when players are in a fight, they can see exactly how much health an enemy has and decide how to use their powers accordingly. But yeah, it's not anything that's going to happen anytime soon, and I do appreciate that I am using that phrase quite a lot. But yeah, at the moment we are so focused on Region 7 that everything else, it's just like, well, let's just get that out the door, and then we can focus on what's coming up in the future other than Region 8. As for the scaling cost, it is something we've discussed before, but apparently there's some technical reason why it's really difficult to do, so it's something that's sat fairly low down on the list. Personally, I would love it to be in there because I still don't have the Valiant Gauntlet after 6 years of playing, because I'm really bad at doing my shrines. I do sort of my bare minimum to get my dailies done, and sometimes not even that. So I would certainly like, there have been times where I've had 10,000 gems. I've got 10,000 gems at the moment, and I've got to admit the temptation is real, even though I'm like more than 3/4 of the way through that unlocking now, but it's just been going on for so long. So yes, it's something that would be nice to have. I can't realistically say whether it'll be something we'll get in the future.
Question 9. It's hard being a leader. From a better chat UI to boss rounds cleared to the ability to change a guild's name, administrators everywhere want to know what features can we one day look forward to that might help us out.
This is something that is very firmly on the list from a purely self-serving point of view, that I am also a guild leader and I am well aware of shortfalls in our administration tools that we give people. I personally would like to see who's spending their orders and who's not every single day of a war. The guild boss thing is interesting because the way that the guild boss leaderboard used to work was that it would rank people by their score, and their score being based on the amount of damage they'd done over all of their attempts. We changed that to its current iteration way back in the day because we felt that the previous iteration was a bit too biased towards whales, because you can buy meat to have more goes. So you could have a free-to-play player who is really amazing, does massive damage in one attack, and they would be lower down the leaderboard than someone who was a bit of a scrub in terms of their setup, but they could just keep on buying meat over and over again to have lots of different goes. So the current leaderboard will certainly be staying as the means as to how we rank players in terms of what accolades they get. But yeah, I think there's no reason, although the UI artist might say otherwise, that we can't have more leaderboards that have different parameters. So it's like, well, I want to see how many attempts the players have done. I want to see who's got the biggest hits in one attack. Guild name changing is something which will probably be quite similar to Knight name changing, that there'll be a cost attached. If anyone's actually interested as to why we have that escalating cost, it's because we feel that it helps discourage trolling and people trying to hide past bad behaviour by just giving themselves a new name. So that is the reason why we have that, and we probably want to do the same for guilds, although I imagine guilds would be changing their names on a less frequent basis. But yes, sort of general improvements for guild admin and guilds in general, is something that we're looking at to addressing later in the year.
Question 10. Expert Rift is a scary place, oftentimes with even scarier rewards. Any chance the boss drops, choice nodes, and shops might be tweaked?
The rewards in Expert Rift aren't going to see any radical changes. We are talking about adding in a few more new layouts, which will have different choice nodes, but they will be based on what's there already. The Expert Rift is kind of like the main place where you can get your cores for upgrading your gauntlet. That is kind of what the rewards were themed around. So we're not going to be changing that, because although there are a small number of players that have maxed out all of their gauntlets, the vast majority haven't, even those that are in the Expert Rift. So for them, the cores are still very, very welcome. And even if you have maxed everything out, you can potentially distill them for Mythic Essence, or you can hold on to them in case we add any more new gauntlets. So we still feel that the current reward system for Expert Rift still very much has its place. That's, as I said, not to say we're not going to add a bit more variety in the future. Perhaps even a few more layouts that don't have time-locked doors, because I know some people, some weird people don't like the time-locked doors. But yes, if you find Expert Rift scary, wait until you see Master Rift.
Question 11. Hero Challenges. What is in store for the community involving this relatively new mode, and will past heroes like KNIGHTHOOD ever be featured again?
We're still working out the cadence of our events at the moment. So obviously we have our seasonal events that repeat every year, like Dark Tour and Troll Hunt. And then we've got Guild Wars and Hero Challenges, and we're also adding Dark Portal into the mix. So we're kind of looking at our calendar and seeing where the best place to fit things in is. We're probably not going to see a new Heroes Challenge until later in the year, but we will see more existing Heroes Challenges before then. The Queen Kryta one is an interesting question, because I wasn't inclined to rerun her event until we've done a Heroes Challenge for each of the different classes, mainly because we don't want to swamp people with warrior charms if they have no interest in being a warrior build. So we're possibly going to see some of our other heroes getting an airing before then. We've got an alchemist planned as our next new hero to go in for a new heroes challenge. So I think it probably is the hunter's turn next for an existing heroes challenge. I personally would quite like to do one for McLeod because he's hilarious. And also we did quite radically rework him a while back. But I think sadly his previous bad reputation still lingers around him somewhat. So actually being able to highlight him as a hero to players who might have dismissed him out of hand because of something that they read on Reddit 4 years ago, I think is a good use of heroes challenges. There's also the potential that we'll rework some existing legendaries or uniques who aren't currently very popular, who haven't really found a place in people's hearts and in the meta, and then using heroes challenge to highlight those heroes. So yeah, that's something that we are actively considering.
Question 12. On the recent roadmap, you mentioned a new game feature called Dark Portal. Can you tell us anything about this mode?
So Dark Portal is a new mini-event which takes place between our main events. It has a few things that will be very similar to our existing events like reward tracks and portal battles, but it does do a few things differently. So if you buy a event pass for Dark Portal, instead of having 6 portal attempts, you get double points instead. There's 2 new enemies, which hopefully people will enjoy smashing up. And there's also a shop, which, as I've previously mentioned, is host to some of our previous event rewards, which you can purchase for Dark Fragments, which is a new currency you earn by playing the Dark Portal event. Unlike event points, this actually persists over different dark portals. So if you go into the shop and the stuff there is something that you already own or just that you're not interested in, keep your dark fragments, and maybe on the next dark portal the shop will have that piece of event gear that you've been longing for, but the Redux chests have been cruelly denying you.
Question 13. The Great Hero Rebalance on the horizon has many players, myself included, excited, curious, and maybe even a little afraid. What changes to our beloved roster can you spoil for us?
I can't help but feel that the Great Hero Rebalance is overselling it somewhat. We're basically doing things a bit more in stages. So the first thing is we're changing some of the max star perks on some of the uniques, focusing on the heroes that had minion-based star perks, because obviously that's only useful in one very specific area of the game, and that's PvP. So we're replacing those with something that makes them a little bit broader in appeal. You may have guessed earlier that both myself and Kieran, one of my fellow designers, are both quite keen on having a Dr. Phlox rework at some point, as we feel that he's currently a little bit underutilised and he's got a magnificent moustache, so really deserves better. On a slightly broader note than the original question, we are going to be looking into status effects as well, because changing them might inherently change any heroes that use those status effects. So that might, in effect, rebalance those heroes without actually touching the heroes. So we've heard that people feel that regen and burn are both a bit underwhelming, so they're probably the likely candidates to get looked at first.
Question 14. On the subject of rebalancing, pre-Atlantica regions and shops are due for quite the makeover, I hear. What can players expect to see changing?
So yes, you're referring to the smooth package. So a bit of background. Previously, when we saw people were getting stuck on particular nodes, our response would be, oh, the battle on there is too hard, let's tone it down a little bit. Unfortunately, what we really needed to have done was look at why people were getting stuck, and a lot of time it was because their hero and gear levels were falling quite behind their knight level. So those changes actually exacerbated things slightly, because people were able to progress along the conquest track further, but their gear was still underleveled and then it was falling even more behind, same with the heroes. And that meant that we were basically just pushing the problem further down. So what we've done with the smooth package is to increase people's access to certain upgrade materials. with the hope that this will make the conquest progress through the game a little bit smoother, and also make things a little bit smoother for those endgame players that are desperately upgrading stuff for the Lady of the Lake. So what we have done is, and I have a list, we have increased production from the Myofen and White Peak mines. We have increased the quantity of upgrade materials available from hunts, which accidentally went out a bit early, so you've all seen that. We've also increased the XP gain from hero shrines for heroes, so hopefully that will make things a little easier for people to keep a broader range of heroes leveled up without relying on scrolls or putting all the resources just into one or two. Possibly one of the more controversial changes is that we've commandeered one of the bounty board reward slots for upgrade materials. So rather than having a choice of 3 items of gear, there will be 2 items of gear and some sort of consumable. The thinking was that yes, people are losing one of their gear choices, but they still have 2 gear choices. They still have multiple bounties to choose from. So hopefully it won't stall people's progress in getting the gear that they want, and will help them keep that gear and heroes upgraded. We've also made some changes to the material exchange shop in White Peak, so not only can you use Vulcanite and Tellurian to get the high rarity versions, you can now also break down higher rarity versions to get the lower rarity stuff. And we've also added a similar shop into the Realm of Fire that allows you to do the same with ores. So you can convert your malachite into cobalt, your cobalt into manganese, or reverse. We've also nerfed Karnheim, which is a fairly major thing, but we found that a lot of the battles, as I mentioned previously, went on for a bit too long. So we've done basically a broad scale nerf of both health and damage, and that will hopefully bring down the duration of the battles with those enemies in, so that will also impact Expert Rift and Dark Onslaught, as well as people's progress through Karnheim, which will now hopefully actually be progress, as opposed to getting murdered on the first battle by the stabby cultists.
Question 15. The most frightful topic on the roadmap for myself is whatever Mythic Armor 2 means. I'm almost afraid to ask, but what can you tell us about this new set of gear, and what exactly does this mean for those of us who have had our souls sucked out by the Lady of the Lake on our quest to master the originals? Bonus existential dread, points, for details on Master Rift as well.
I can't tell you a lot about Mythic Armor 2, sadly, because as you may have noticed from the roadmap, it is under the concepting section, which means it is extremely early days, so I don't have anything concrete that I'm comfortable sharing with anyone, or indeed anything concrete at all, because the entire point of concepting is that it's still in the early days of discussion and nothing has been firmly set in stone of this is exactly what we're going to do. And even when we put down stuff that's, oh, this is exactly what we're going to do, stuff can still change during development if we test it and we feel that it's not quite working the way that we want, or we don't think that it will jive with the players. Oh, I just said jive with the players. God, I sound about like 400 or something. Sorry. Can you edit that out? You should probably edit that out. Anyway, where was I? So yes, you also wanted to know about Master Rift. Again, very early days of concepting, but the main aim that we want with Master Rift is that the rewards will scale with the player level. With Expert Rift currently, we've got players going in at level 50 and we've got players going in at level 60, but the rewards don't change. You're always pulling from the same reward pool. So hopefully Master Rift will alleviate a few of those issues that we've found with Expert Rift. Also, I'm going to fill it with unnerfed war beasts.
Question 16. Let's touch base on various scripted elements of the game. Will the way our knights behave in auto mode and when on defense in places like Arena and Guild vs. Guild ever be changed?
The boring yet swift answer to that is there's no plans of changing it in the near future.
Question 17. Arena, Guild vs. Guild, and minions. These topics go hand in hand. Are there any changes on the horizon for any of these regarding rewards, mechanics, minion charms, anything of that nature that you can share?
With Arena, we've got no major changes planned in the imminent future, but we do want to have a re-review of how Arena Leagues work, possibly later in the year. With Guild Wars, that's sort of an ongoing labour of love, so obviously we're constantly making changes to the map every time, and the rewards, sort of moving things around to keep a bit of variety in there. And we've also added a few node types over the last couple of months. But yeah, it's still very much ongoing, so later in the year, once we've got Atlantica out, we do want to have a look at the hold rewards, because we don't really want people to just be having a mad rush right before reset to take the nodes. We want it to be a little more dynamic than that and a bit fairer to people in all time zones. So that's definitely something that's on our list to address. I think there's also a bit of room to improve the matchmaking, because that's basically an ongoing thing constantly, just because it has to be by its very nature, because the player base is always changing, so we have to always make sure that it's kind of working as intended. With minions, we've long wanted a feature where we can level up minions outside of battle and not just relying on duplicate minions for food. So that's something that's in the early concept stages. Can't say when or if that will ever get put in. But yeah, the main thing around minions is just doing a bit of bug fixing. So we know there's one of the minion charms that isn't working as intended, and also that buff consumption in Guild Wars isn't working as intended. So we're hoping to have that fixed for the next war. We will be adding new minions at some point, but that probably will come in with Master Rift, so it's a while off for yet.
Question 18. Veterans have been mercilessly stung by the design of hero chests for a long time now, even more so with the introduction of Guild vs. Guild. Are there any plans to change the way gold dust chests work for players with max star unique heroes?
No plans currently, and it's unlikely to change until we add a lot more unique heroes to the roster. Sorry.
Question 19. Photo mode is a beloved feature that allows us to show off our favorite looks, but it hasn't been updated since its arrival. Will you guys ever improve our camera capabilities?
As the person who originally designed the photo mode, thank you for calling it a beloved feature. The original spec did actually have a bit more to it, so originally we were able to use different backgrounds from the game as backdrops for your photos, and also be able to play different animations on your knight and pose them differently. But unfortunately we had to cut a lot of that out to get the feature out by the deadline, and it's not something that's ever gone back in. We've not got any plans to bring those features back in the near future, but a bit further down the line, who knows?
Question 20. Knighthood demands a lot of our time and attention, especially on the weekends. Between the Rift time gating us and portals being exclusive to the same window, how hopeful can we be that changes will be made to be more inclusive of players of all schedules and lifestyles?
The design team are aware that things are a bit stacked at the weekends, not only because we see people mention it on Discord, but because we also all play the game as well. So whenever we create or schedule a new feature, we do try and be aware of what else it's going to be running alongside, so as not to sort of overload people too much. We do want to look back at some of the earlier features that we've put in earlier in the game's life cycle to make sure that they're still playing well with things that we've introduced at a later point. So yeah, as you've said, one of these things are the Rift time gates, so we might look at adding more layouts that don't have time gates to have a bit more variety so people aren't getting blocked off on a weekly basis. We might look at removing them altogether. So for example, with the roaming monster objectives, and this is a bit of a spoiler here, we've removed the status effects off all of the standard roaming monsters across all of the regions. We've left them on the event monsters just because the event monsters scale with player level. When we originally set up the roaming monster objective system, the idea with the status effects was to encourage players to have like a wide range of heroes and gear. But subsequently, we've added things like the Enlightenment Library and also side stories during events that utilise status effects that I'd argue are a lot more effective because you can use them on whatever enemies you need, so you don't have to worry about wiping them out. So there's not really an argument to keep them in. So we looked at them and was like, yeah, we can get rid of those now. So yes, we do acknowledge that occasionally we need to revisit older stuff to make sure it's working better with the newer stuff. So yeah, ask a question about Rift Gate timers, get an answer about roaming monsters. Yay!
Let's see. Fun questions. When will coffee ever be added to the game? Never. Who's your favorite player? As if you need to be told out loud. Why does Theory always win quizzes? Magic fingers. Why is Olaf so dummy thick? Kami, you can't just steal my question, okay? That's not how this works, all right? Get your own question. Question 1. The art style of Knighthood is undeniably unique, and it has garnered many fans, myself included. What is the inspiration behind the game's artistic design?
So I asked Dan, who is one of MIDOKI's founders and art director and responsible for the look of all of our games, and he said that his main inspirations were old travel posters from the 1930s and 40s, the anime The Castle of Cagliostro, and Jean Girard, who's also known as Mobius. And I have no idea if I said that. I apologise in advance to any French or Italians who might be listening. Sorry, I did German at school. Question
2. Are there sets of gear or skins that have interesting lore you're particularly fond of and would like to share?
I'd say my favourite would probably be the Dirk armour from the first Troll Hunt event. I really like the way it looks. I really like black and red. And I really enjoyed fleshing out sort of Dirker society a bit, the kind of background, because previously we had only a little bit about it. You know, dark elves were a thing that existed. Lanasa was a dark elf. So actually exploring that race a little bit more and writing stuff up about them was really good fun, and I'm hoping that we can introduce them a bit more in the future at some point, whether that's as a hero or by some other means. I think that would be really cool.
Question 3. Who is your favorite hero, and conversely, who is your favorite enemy?
It's really hard to pick a favourite, because do you pick it on what they look like or on their abilities? In terms of what they look like, Grizz is definitely one of my favourites because he's a big bear, and his animation where he hits his crossbow in frustration and then it misfires and his ears just droop and he's like, oh, that is my favourite animation in the entire game, and that's going to take some beating. But I actually run an alchemist build, so I normally play with Brutus and Giba, as I also have a lot of acid-based charms on my weapons to maximise damage against acid-inflicted enemies. So yeah, it's not cool. It's not cool, but I like it. It's fun for me. My favourite event hero is probably Eileen, just because she is an absolute lunatic. I really like that sort of feral child sort of vibe. In terms of enemies, it's got to be Alden. It's got to be Alden the Ferocious, because he has the funniest bug in the game, which you may have noticed that if you have the game on auto and sped up, on his intro, his chicken leg does not behave as expected, and it looks like he's screaming at this floating chicken leg. And it's so funny, we deliberately marked the bug as extremely low priority to fix because we quite like it and we'd actually quite like to keep it. It's actually a lot easier to answer least favourite enemy, and that would be the automaton archers. They can go and do one, quite frankly, and I'm heartily looking forward to them getting nerfed because they deserve it.
Question 4. What are ways player choices and playstyles have surprised you?
Oh, how do players mess up our game? I think that's what you actually are asking. As designers, we kind of are supposed to expect the unexpected because we know in our hearts that players are going to interact with the game in strange and unexpected ways, yet we still get surprised. So I think one of the things that immediately jumps to mind is the fact that all of our battles have a 64 turn limit. 64 because coders love that number, and also we thought it's a number that no one's ever going to get to in the battles. None of our battles are ever going to take 64 turns, We didn't count on people farming poor old Kren for the Maverick Gauntlet and repeatedly punching him in the face until they broke the game. So that was an experience. And charms, when we introduced charms, we expected people to have a broader range of builds, for builds to be generally a bit more balanced. But instead everyone started stacking hero charms like absolute lunatics. So that was unexpected, but it did kind of have the side effect of informing future design decisions. So when we did Heroes Challenge, we decided to put hero charms on the reward track, one because they fit thematically, but also because we knew it would be a good reward even if someone wasn't interested necessarily in that particular hero for that challenge. The cooperation in the community is always a genuine delight to see, so having people emerge as cartographers who create the rift maps, so people can decide whether they want to do normal rift or expert rift this week, whether a door is worth spending a key on. That's been really great to see, and we really appreciate the effort those people put into that. And pacifism in wars, that's always an unexpected but delight to see when you have multiple guilds within a war that get in contact with each other via Discord or whatever and agree to not fight, or they very strategically decide when to swap nodes so they can still progress along the track. That is genuinely adorable. People getting up in the middle of the night in other time zones to do the Guild War reset, that is not adorable, that is disturbing, which is why we want to change that, because it's not really healthy. You need your sleep. Have a proper sleep. No screen time before bed. Certainly no screen time in the middle of bed. No, stop. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question, and apologies if we didn't get around to yours. And also sorry if the answer to any of your questions weren't what you wanted to hear. It's genuinely a privilege to have a community that is so interested and invested in the future of the game and who love the game as much as we do. So thank you so much, all of you. And thanks to you, Theory, for asking all the questions and being the voice of the players. It has been an honour. And also thank you for editing out all the sound of my dog's tippy-tappy feet. You are going to edit that out, aren't you?